Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel for another Moving to New Zealand Q&A. Every time I think I can't possibly get any more questions than I've already answered, I get more questions and I'm quite happy to answer them, so that's what I'll be doing today. Although the usual disclaimer applies, I only have my own experience to speak of, so there are some things that I just don't know the answer to, and we moved 6.5 years ago, so some things have changed, but I'll do my best to answer the questions from my own experience. If you're new here, I will link the playlist to the rest of these videos and all of my Moving to New Zealand themed videos over here and down below. And I'll also link my Facebook group down below. It is a closed group, so your posts stay private, and there are over 3,000 members in there to answer questions and offer support. So I'll just jump into the questions, which are not grouped in any particular category, although I have listed them down below with timestamps, so if you want to jump to one particular question, then you can do so. So one of the questions I received was, why are most of the houses in New Zealand single story? And I don't really know the answer to that. I can make some guesses. I can guess that it's because we have the space. It's not an overcrowded country, so there is space to spread out in single story homes. Most houses are quite modest. There are double story homes. They are certainly not rare, but the majority of standard Kiwi houses are weatherboard houses that are on a timber frame and that are single story. And I'm wondering if that is the preferred style for cost and also possibly for earthquake safety, but I'm really not sure. Those are just guesses. Our last home in England was on 4 levels. We had 3 stories and a cellar, and I was done with stairs by the time we left there, so I'm quite happy to have a single story home. Another question I had was, what is the cost of the move? I can't remember exactly everything that we spent money on, and like I said, it was 6.5 years ago, and we were moving from England to New Zealand, so it may not be the same for somebody else, or your costs may vary if you have more or fewer people to buy plane tickets for or to have medicals for, whether or not you use an immigration agency, the size of container you have to ship your goods. But I'll just lay out some of the costs that I remember and the things that we spent money on, and then you can work out what those things will cost you. So the shipping container, we had a 20-foot container, and that was shipped from England to New Zealand for £4,000. We had medicals. We had to have full medicals, and Grant and I had to have chest x-rays as well. Anyway, our medicals cost us, I think, £700 each, and there are 4 of us in our family. Plane tickets, I honestly can't remember. I want to say £1,500 each, but I can't remember. So just work out when you'll be flying, one-way ticket, well, depending on which visa you come on for your family, and you can work out plane ticket costs. We did not use immigration consultants, but if you do, then you'll have to factor in those costs as well. I did an interview with Sarah from New Zealand Shores. I will link that video here and down below, and she mentioned in there some of the costs involved with using an agency and what the visas will cost. So there is an application fee when you submit your expression of interest, and then there's a fee when you get granted your visas. So depending on what the fees are now, they will have changed in the last 6.5 years, and depending on what visa that you come on, those are costs to consider as well. Other costs included, we bought a little mini laptop because we were shipping our computers, so we knew we were going to be without our computers for 3 months, so we bought a little laptop to tide us over in the meantime, so that was an extra cost. Obviously suitcases, if you don't have suitcases and things to bring your stuff over in. Other miscellaneous costs as we left were, we left our home, which we were going to be renting out. We dropped off the last few bits and pieces that we didn't need. We dropped off our car to the person we'd sold it to. We picked up a rental car, so that cost money. We drove down to London and we checked into a hotel near Heathrow Airport. So then the hotel overnight was another cost. And we returned our rental car, and then the next morning we just got a shuttle to the airport. So it's little extra costs like that that you need to factor in. Once you arrive in New Zealand, there's going to be costs like you need a deposit when you rent. You're going to need to buy school uniform for your kids. You're going to need to kit out your pantry from scratch, all of your herbs, spices, condiments, sugar, salt, everything. All of the food obviously, but then also the pantry staples that you would normally just have in your kitchen are going to have to be bought from scratch. So those are costs to factor in as well. I know a lot of people submit questions asking me questions like, what is the move going to cost, wanting a neatly packaged answer, and unfortunately for most of the questions there's not going to be one answer for everybody that I can give you. I get questions like, where's the best place to move? Same story. Or what is the cost of living there? Same story. There's so many variables that it depends on. So those are just a few things for you to factor in and to have a look at what it's going to cost you when working out for yourself what it will cost your family to move. I was asked, why did we decide against Canada? I think I've answered this question before, but I can't be sure, so I'll just answer it again. We had at one point decided to move to Canada and then decided against it. And the reason we decided against it was the length and the severity of the winters. That was just not for us. One of the reasons we left England was because of the weather, and the thought of having such a cold, long winter just didn't sit right with us. At the time, my husband was a police officer, and we just pictured him doing his job in that kind of weather, which you need to be driving, you need to be outdoors in the elements, and we just decided that was not going to suit us. A question I had was, why did you do dual citizenship? Now, when we moved to England, we were there for long enough to gain British citizenship. And when we did that, we applied to retain our South African citizenship so that we were dual citizens. I think at the time we were just not ready to let go of South African citizenship. When we came to New Zealand, we came on a residency visa. We later applied for permanent residency, and towards the end of last year we became New Zealand citizens. This time we did not apply to retain our South African citizenship. You have to specifically request it, and so that fell away. So we are now dual British and New Zealand citizens. Some of the reasons we became dual citizens is that being British is kind of a part of our journey and our family history and our adventure. We didn't want to retain South African citizenship because we have no plans on returning there. We have no plans to even visit there. But we do hope to visit England sometime. We wanted to give our children options if they wanted to visit or work there in the future. And it just felt right. Some countries don't allow you to retain dual citizenship. I believe Germany is one of them. If you become a New Zealand citizen, you have to forfeit your German citizenship. So that's quite a big decision to make. But for us, it just felt right to retain our British citizenship because we could, and to allow our South African citizenship to fall away because that no longer really feels like something we need to have. I told you these questions are in no particular order, so the next question is, will my UK TV work in New Zealand? Our TV did work when we moved to New Zealand. The voltage in the UK is the same as in New Zealand, so all you have to do is switch out the plugs. But although our TV did work, it didn't receive Freeview, so we had to buy a Freeview box to receive signal to actually play public TV. So that's about $100 that you'll have to factor in to buy the box. Or you could choose to sell your TV in the UK and buy a new one here that you don't need to buy the box to go along with. The question of plugs came up in my Moving to New Zealand Facebook group, and somebody posted saying, what about the plug situation? She hadn't even thought of it. So as I mentioned, the voltage is the same in the UK as New Zealand, so all we had to do was remove plugs off appliances and put New Zealand plugs onto the cable. That is another expense that you might want to factor in when moving here, is buying all of the plugs for all of your appliances, because they are going to be way more than you think there are. Now, not all countries have the same voltage as New Zealand. The US does not, so you are going to either need to replace your appliances or use a transformer between your appliance and the wall socket. I was asked a specific question about citizenship. I am a US citizen as well as my son, but my wife is still an Indonesian citizen with a permanent resident status in the US. Do you know if the process would be the same for all three of us coming to New Zealand? She's concerned that she may have to return to Indonesia before going to New Zealand. As I mentioned, we were living in England and we had dual British and South African citizenship when applying to New Zealand, and we did not have to go to South Africa for anything. We did need to obtain police clearance certificates from South Africa, but we didn't have to leave the country. I don't know for sure if that's the same for somebody who is a resident of a different country but is a citizen of a country that they're not currently living in. I am not qualified nor legally allowed to give immigration advice. I would recommend contacting Sarah from New Zealand Shores, which is a reputable immigration agency, if you have specific questions like that. But from my personal experience of holding citizenship, although it was dual, in a country in which I was not resident, I did not have to return to that country. I was asked, can you give me an idea of how long it took to get your visas after your husband got his job offer? I believe it was 3 months from submitting our expression of interest until we actually received our visas and were ready to go. I was asked what the cost of the visas were, and I don't recall specifically, I'm sorry, and like I said, it was 6.5 years ago, so the costs have probably changed anyway. I was asked, what is the cost of a new car in New Zealand? I will link down below to a website which shows you all the different brands or makes of cars and what their new car costs are. The cheapest I could find, with just a quick squiz through there, was a Suzuki, the smallest, tiniest little tin can of a car, and that was 16,000 new for a manual car. That was the cheapest I could find, but like I said, I didn't look all the way through all of the different brands. Personally, I would never buy a brand new car just because of how quickly they depreciate, but that's a personal choice. A lot of cars here are maybe 1 to 3 year old imports from Japan. You are so much better off buying a Japanese model than buying a European model or an American model here in New Zealand, because parts and servicing is just so much cheaper and easier to come by. So things like Nissan, Honda, Toyota, Mazda, those kind of cars are quite popular here, and they are very often imported from Japan, 1 to 3 years old. And of course you save money buying a car that's 1 to 3 years old than buying a brand new one. I was asked, is the credit score that is used in the USA universal to New Zealand? I have no idea. I'm sorry, I can't answer this. I don't know how they check your credit history. We came over here, we had rent obviously and just our usual bills. We only applied for a mortgage. That was the only loans we've applied for in New Zealand after 4 years, I think, and we had no problem getting a mortgage. I think possibly they just look at your credit history in New Zealand, and obviously they ask you, have you ever been declared bankrupt before, which I think would apply to before moving to New Zealand. I'm really not sure. I'm just speculating here. I'm not qualified to answer this question. I'm just sharing my experience of when we applied for a loan and got it. They looked at our current expenses, they looked at our current income, and obviously like if we'd had any financial trouble since moving to New Zealand. I'm not sure if they actually check before you come to the country. So the short answer to your question is, I'm sorry, I don't know. I was asked, do you file a yearly income tax return in New Zealand? I do, because I'm self-employed and I have multiple revenue streams. My husband does not, because that's all done through his workplace. Generally, that's done through your employer. They will handle your taxes for you. You'll be told in your employment contract what your gross salary is, and you'll just receive your net salary after taxes and things have been taken off already. That's usually what happens. As I said, I'm self-employed, so I do need to submit my own tax return every year. I've seen the question come up very often, and I was specifically asked about short-term rentals until you get settled. You come to New Zealand as a fresh immigrant, you maybe don't have a rental lined up for you to permanently live in, and you're wondering where to stay in the meantime, and there's no easy answer to this, I'm afraid. You're looking at Airbnb, which I'll link down below, Book a Batch, again it's similar, I will link that down below. They are going to be expensive. They're rented for short-term rentals, and they're rented fully furnished with all of the things that you need, so they are going to cost more. We have an Airbnb, and for rentals of a month or longer we give a 40% discount. We can't afford to give more of a discount, because if we drop the price 50% or more, we would actually just make more letting it out for, you know, multiple short stays rather than renting it out to somebody for a month or longer. So that's what you're going to find, I'm afraid, with Book a Batch and Airbnb and that sort of thing, is it's going to be expensive per night, but you can possibly negotiate with your Airbnb host, especially if it's off season. They may be willing to give you a greater discount per night for your rental. It's just another thing to factor in your settling in costs. And then I was asked, what is your favorite part of New Zealand and why did you choose New Zealand over everywhere else? I've answered the question before of why we chose New Zealand, and I'll just briefly answer it again. It's because it just suited us the best. We wanted to move to an English-speaking country, and our choices were really between Australia, New Zealand and Canada, and it was like a Goldilocks situation: too cold, too hot, just right, to this, to that, just right. New Zealand just seemed to be just right for what we wanted. So if you're trying to make the decision, I would recommend stepping back and mapping out what you want your life to look like. Write down everything, big and small. Do you want to have chickens? Do you want to have sunshine? Do you want to swim in the ocean? Do you want to have lots of trendy restaurants? Do you want a good theatre scene? Do you want natural beauty? Do you want to be close to other places to travel? Like, just write down exactly what your dream life looks like, and then go looking and see which country matches that the best. So the things that we wanted were low population, lots of natural beauty, laid back lifestyle, outdoor lifestyle, temperate weather, friendly people, just loads of things that New Zealand had to offer. That is what we wanted, and so New Zealand suited us. It's not going to suit everybody. I'm not saying that it's the perfect country for everybody to move to. It completely depends on what you want your life to look like. But that is why we chose New Zealand, and we have absolutely loved it here. It completely suits us, and we are citizens here now, and this is our home. The first part of that question was, what is your favorite part of New Zealand? Now, I haven't visited all of New Zealand, obviously. I've visited areas of Auckland, all the way down Hamilton, Cambridge, Rotorua, Taranaki, down to Wellington, and I visited Napier. And everywhere I've gone is wonderful. There's the same Kiwi feel to everything, but there's certainly a different vibe in different areas. So far, my favorite place is South Taranaki, which is exactly where I live. We definitely have plans to visit more areas in the country, and of course I'll be vlogging that, so be sure to subscribe if you want to see that. But for now, from what I've seen and the places I've been, South Taranaki is paradise, and I'm so happy to be able to live here. Those are all of the questions that I have for today. Like I said, I will link the playlist down below of other videos like this and all of my moving to New Zealand themed videos. If you have any more questions that haven't been answered in any of those videos, be sure to leave them down below and I will put them into my next video. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.